Shortly after I recorded the episode where I talked about my favorite verse in the Bible, I remembered another verse that was very close to my heart as I was growing up, so I decided to share that with all of you as well. It's Romans chapter 12, verse 2, and it reads, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." First of all, this verse is preceded by the verse that calls us to be living sacrifices, which, if you haven't listened to my episode about what it means to lay down your life for Christ, is about living in a way guided by God's will rather than your own desires. This second verse, then, is set up as instructions on how to put that principle of living according to God's will into action, and it gives us some very powerful steps for it. The first part of this verse instructs us to not conform to the pattern of the world. This is very important. As people, we want to be liked and respected by other people. This often leads us to a groupthink mentality where we want to do and say what everyone else is doing and saying so we can fit in with them. What this does, however, is it prevents us from living in a way that has any significance. If all we ever do is go with the flow, then we will have no greater impact on this world and the lives of the people around us than anyone else around us does. Part of making your mark in the world requires stepping outside of the mundane and what's comfortable for you so you can be extraordinary instead of just ordinary. The way we step out of this conformity is found in the second part of this verse. It says, "But be transformed by the renewing of your mind." This kind of transformation in your life doesn't just come from acting a certain way or following a list of do's and don'ts. It has to start in our mind. We have to begin looking at our life from a different angle. We need to process our world and situations from a new lens. This transformation isn't just a change, it's a renewing. A change would be taking the way we think now and adjusting it piece by piece to fit this new mold. A renewing, on the other hand, takes you back to square one. It breaks away the rotten foundation our minds have been built upon and begins the process from the ground up. Anyone with a basic knowledge in construction can understand this difference. When a building is built on a poor foundation, it's a struggle to keep it in good condition. Any repairs you make are just fighting the inevitable. The best course of action is to break everything down to the foundation that needs corrected and to rebuild from there. This is what God sometimes needs to do in our life. If we've adopted the world's way of thinking for a long time, it can be difficult to make the transition to godly thinking through our own efforts. Thankfully, if we ask God, He can lay that new foundation for us, so we can begin to look at the world through the lens of full truth rather than just half-truths. It's not just a change, it's a renewing. And this renewing lets us then break the conformity to the world that has been directing our life. All of this effort is then promised a reward to follow: the ability to test and approve God's good, pleasing, and perfect will. When we allow God to transform us by the renewing of our mind, we are able to break our conformity to the world and also become able to recognize where God is leading us. We can identify the course that God has laid out for our lives. This is wonderful news because God desires to give us a life that is good and fulfilling. The paths of the world leave us feeling empty and brings us destruction and hardships. But God's will, although it is still filled with trials and tribulations, brings us a peace and purpose that equips us for each and every day. This is the life and process that God has promised to us through this verse. a life that breaks our conformity, renews our thinking, and sets us on God's perfect path for our life. If you'd like to talk to me more about this subject or have a question you'd like me to address, you can contact me through the Sermon in the Pocket Facebook page or email me at sermoninthepocket@gmail.com. And if you like this program and want to support it, you can pledge a monthly support on my Patreon page. And I encourage you to share this with family and friends who you think would enjoy listening to it or benefit from it. Either way, thank you for taking the time to listen, and have a wonderful day.